From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Facebook's algorithms provide hyper-amplification for the worst ideas, says whistleblower Haugen. Michigan school shooting suspect Ethan Crumbly charged with terrorism and murder. U.S. Supreme Court appears likely to roll back abortion rights. Greyhound accused of discriminating against Muslim bus driver, now it has to pay up. Lord Mayor of the City of London unveils a rubbish Christmas tree. Don't freak out about Omicron, says BioNTech CEO. Our top story tonight. Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen is calling on U.S. lawmakers to hold the tech giant accountable. Haugen says they must force the company to be transparent about its algorithms, which she says are providing hyper-amplification for the worst ideas. She made the statement while testifying before a U.S. House subcommittee on big tech's legal immunity.
That the choices that they made around the design of the newsfeed algorithm were, while increasing the amount of content consumed, increasing the length of sessions, that it was providing hyper-amplification for the worst ideas. I'll give you an example. Groups, like most people think Facebook is about your family and friends. Facebook has pushed people more and more aggressively towards large groups because it lengthens your session.
Facebook is accused of causing genocide in Burma because of its negligence. Stacey Abrams announced Wednesday that she is pursuing a bid for governor in 2022. Abrams was Georgia's 2018 Democratic gubernatorial nominee. The move means Abrams could face a rematch against Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, to whom she narrowly lost the governor's race 3 years ago. In a video shared on social media, Abrams said she's running because opportunity and success in Georgia shouldn't be determined by your zip code, background, or access to power. The Democrat was widely credited with boosting voter turnout in Georgia in 2020. This helped President Joe Biden defeat Donald Trump in the state. It also helped two Democrats, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, in capturing Senate seats this past January. In related news, two-term Republican Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, who is a critic of Trump, will not seek re-election in 2022. Michigan school shooting suspect Ethan Crumbly has been charged with terrorism and murder. The 15-year-old killed 4 students and injured 6 others, as well as one teacher at Oxford High School outside of Detroit on Tuesday. 2 of the injured remain in serious condition in area hospitals Wednesday, while several others had been discharged. Crumbly's lawyer entered a not guilty plea. A local sheriff said yesterday that the teen went to school with the intent to kill people. Police said that on the night before the shooting, Crumbly recorded a video on his cell phone saying he was planning to launch an attack at the school the next day. He allegedly used a semi-automatic pistol bought during Black Friday sales to shoot his classmates at point-blank range. Crumbly had no previous record with the school or police that suggested any problems. However, he was called into the school administration office for an unspecified issue on Monday. On Tuesday, prior to the attack, he was again called in by school administrators, this time with his parents. The conservative-dominated U.S. Supreme Court appeared poised Wednesday to roll back abortion rights in the United States. This was by upholding a law in Mississippi that would ban the procedure after 15 weeks. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., as the 9 justices heard 2 hours of arguments. It is the most pivotal abortion case to reach the nation's highest court in 50 years. In the Roe v. Wade 1973 ruling, the Supreme Court voted that access to abortion is a constitutional right until the fetus is viable outside the womb, which is typically at 22 to 24 weeks. Mississippi Solicitor General Scott Stewart urged the court to uphold the state's 15-week ban. He also pushed to strike down the landmark cases that enshrined a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. Should the Mississippi law be upheld, more than 24 other U.S. states are expected to seek to restrict abortion. The court is expected to render its decision in June. U.S. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said Tuesday that Democrats are weighing what to do about Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado. This is in connection with anti-Muslim comments she made about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in the House. At a briefing with reporters, the Maryland Democrat would not comment on whether Democrats might censure Boebert or strip her of her committee assignments. Instead, he said the Republican Party has a duty to condemn her. Boebert said she felt safe sharing an elevator ride with Omar because one of the first Muslim women in Congress was not wearing a backpack, equating Omar to a terrorist. Omar said the interaction on the elevator never happened and accused Boebert of falsifying the story to arouse her base. Hoyer said it wasn't a first for Boebert. CNN reported on Tuesday that Boebert also suggested to a crowd in September that Omar was a terrorist. Greyhound bus service will have to pay a Muslim woman $45,000. This was after Alia Hadith applied to work as a bus driver, but was forced to leave training when management told her she couldn't wear an abaya on the job, federal officials said. An abaya is a long, loose robe some Muslim women wear. The settlement comes more than 2 years after the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filed a complaint in Maryland federal court on behalf of Hadith. It accused Greyhound Lines of violating Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bars discrimination based on religion. Greyhound Lines is the largest intercity bus carrier in the U.S. Hadith applied to work for Greyhound in Baltimore, Maryland in November 2017. The lawsuit states that she asked about her clothing during the interview. The supervisor said it wouldn't be a problem and offered her a job. Former U.S. President Donald Trump tested positive for COVID-19 3 days before his first debate against Joe Biden last year. Ex-Trump aide Mark Meadows revealed this in his recently released memoir. Meadows was Trump's fourth and last chief of staff. He said each presidential candidate was required to test negative for the virus within 72 hours of the debate's start. But Trump hid this information in violation of the rules of debate. A few days later, on October 2nd, he announced that he had contracted the virus and that he was going to the hospital. Trump called Meadows' claims fake news on Wednesday. Heavy fighting took place between Iran's border guards and the Taliban on Wednesday in northeastern Iran, with reports of casualties on both sides. The clashes lasted more than 5 hours and erupted when the Taliban reportedly overran the Iranian border posts that connect to Nimroz province. Fighting was fueled by a wall that Iran is constructing along its insecure and largely porous border with Afghanistan to prevent illegal crossings. The Taliban claims that the wall is constructed on the zero point of the border and not on the Iranian side. Tehran rejects the claim. The fighting has reportedly stopped, with officials from both sides expected to meet. Iran and Afghanistan share a rugged border on difficult terrain that is over 600 miles long. For Bangladesh's ruling party, the more you hate Pakistan, the more you will love Bangladesh. On November 25th, a ruling party leader, Muhammad Al-Mamun, filed a lawsuit in a Bangladeshi court naming each member of the Pakistani cricket squad. The team was in the country to play a T20 and a test series last week. In the lawsuit, Mamun accused the Pakistani players of hurting the national sentiment of Bangladesh by hoisting the flag of Pakistan in the country. The Lord Mayor of the City of London, Vincent Keaveny, unveiled a Christmas tree made out of waste at his official residence, Mansion House. The alternative festive tree is installed on the balcony overlooking the busy bank intersection in the center of London's financial hub. Materials were sourced from street sweepers and waste management organizations to highlight the amount of waste created during the festive period. Here is Vincent Keaveny, Lord Mayor of the City of London.
Well, at Christmas we're all so used to seeing the green Christmas tree, green holly wreaths, and of course that's very important for a lot of people. The symbolism of Christmas, there's a lot about that about those objects at Christmas time. But we wanted to send a message too about Christmas and a sustainable Christmas. The symbolism of this tree, that we can actually have a sustainable Christmas. We can create something, a wonderful work of art, something that looks very striking, with that message of when you're thinking about Christmas, think about how you can make your Christmas a bit more sustainable. That's really the message.
Outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel announced Thursday that Germany will ban people who have not been vaccinated against COVID-19 from large parts of public life. Culture and leisure nationwide will be open only to those who have been vaccinated or recovered from COVID. She added that the same rule would apply to non-essential shops. In related news, the United States on Wednesday announced its first confirmed case of COVID's Omicron variant that has been detected in California. It was found in a fully vaccinated traveler who had recently returned from South Africa and was recovering from mild symptoms. The variant has prompted travel bans on South Africa from a number of nations worldwide. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has slammed the restrictions and said we needed to buy some time to be able to prepare, understand what's going on.
With a virus that is truly borderless, travel restrictions that isolate any one country or region are not only deeply unfair and punitive, they are ineffective.
South Africa's president said Wednesday that the latest round of COVID-19 related travel bans is akin to punishing the country for its advanced genomic sequencing and ability to detect new variants quicker. Cyril Ramaphosa said in his opening remarks during a state visit to Nigeria that excellent science should be applauded and not punished. BioNTech co-founder Ugur Sahin is advising vaccinated people not to freak out over COVID-19's Omicron variant, which has emerged in the last few weeks. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, Sahin said that while the variant could lead to more vaccinated people becoming infected, they will likely remain protected against severe illness. Sahin and his wife Özlem Türeci helped produce the BioNTech Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, the first in the world, last year. He said, "Don't freak out. The plan remains the same. Speed up the administration of a third booster shot." Sahin and his wife are Turkish Muslim immigrants to Germany. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the Muslim Council of Britain's report on British media's coverage of Islam and Muslims in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Muslims are concerned about media. Media says things and Islamophobes have a heyday. They thrive on it. But we sit in America and complain about it. But there is one organization in the United Kingdom, Muslim Council of Britain, or MCB, which has decided to do something about that. I wish we can bring them to the United States. But they have issued not one, but 1, 2, and now there is third report. And good thing about this work is that they are now getting some reaction. Sunday Times is a paper, and its chief editor says, well, their criticism is correct. What is their criticism? To discuss with us is one of the lead of this program at Muslim Council of Britain, for RIZWANA HAMID. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Walaikum salam, and thank you for having me on.
Well, tell us, what is this report which you have generated?
So how British media's coverage of Muslims and Islam, that's the title of the report. So what we've done is look at the coverage between the period of 2018 and 2020. And we worked with a very strict methodology that we've developed with academics who are experts in the field of corpus linguistics and who've also covered and done reports on how Muslims are covered in the media. So with this methodology, what we do is on a daily basis, we get fed articles and broadcast clips that contain one or more of 50 keywords that we've identified relate to Muslims and Islam. So it could be anything from Muslim to Sharia to hijab to ISIS to, jihad, any of these words. And what we then do is measure these articles online and broadcast clips against 5 key metrics. So we ask, is the article or broadcast clip generalizing, misrepresenting? Is it inaccurate? Is the headline misleading or the imagery misleading? Is there a lack of prominence given to a Muslim voice? And depending on how many yeses or nos we get a rating of it being either inconclusive, not biased, biased, or very biased. And from that, we then do further statistical analysis. So what we have come up with this is that when it comes to online digital articles, almost 60% associate Muslims with negative behavior or aspects, so negative coverage. And in broadcast, that figure is 47%. The right-leaning press is worse than the left-leaning press. When it comes to television, regional and local broadcasters fare much better than national broadcasters. And drama seems to be one of the main kind of drivers of negative tropes and narratives about Muslims and Islam. And the theme that generally Muslims are reported in, and the context and paradigm, is in relation to extremism and terrorism, with many, many tropes of, Muslims being incompatible with Western values, Islam being a threat to Western democracies, Muslims are trying to take over Europe, so the Islamization of Europe, as they call it. Women have no agency, Islam is misogynistic, anti-Semitic, inherently intolerant of other religions. So all of these tropes that exist, what we've shown and how our work is very different to anybody else who's monitoring or even, assessing how the media reports on Muslims and Islam, is that we are evidence-based. So everything that we say, we show with concrete examples, whether they're misleading headlines, whether it's imagery that's been misused or is completely irrelevant, whether it's kind of broadcast clips that give platforms to far-right individuals who attack Muslims and yet go completely unchallenged. So I think that's why we've been quite successful when it comes to engaging with the media. And we do engage with them very constructively by showing this evidence base. We hold roundtable discussions with them. We have one-to-one meetings. We kind of make submissions and into guidelines and editorial policies. And they can't kind of hide behind the facts, because when you show people the evidence, it's very hard to kind of deny it. They may not always agree with us, but the fact is they have to look at it. And, we've shown quite extreme examples as well, whereby people have been defamed and libeled and have had to go to court. And some of the major establishment broadsheet newspapers have had to pay out hundreds of thousands of libel in damages to people that they've completely reported on inaccurately, to the extent where they've destroyed people's lives. One person that was accused of being a fixer for child groomers, he lost his job at the council where he worked at. His marriage broke down. He couldn't see his children for 2 years. So real life impact. And we've also assessed that when major stories, negative stories come out, it has an impact on hate crimes on the ground. And we see an increase in hate crimes. So when Boris Johnson, for example, made his comment about, Muslim women in niqabs and burqas looking like letterboxes and bank robbers, the statistics went through the roof, almost over 300% in terms of hate crimes after the Christchurch attacks. Again, even though Muslims were the victims there, a huge increase in hate crimes. So, I think the evidence base is what makes the difference in terms of what we're doing.
What I'm looking here is that you mention that regional and local media is better than the national media. I wonder if the news agencies have more sway when it comes to national media as compared to the local media, which is connected with communities, care for communities, and know people.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of our findings, that AFP, AP and Reuters were the biggest drivers in terms of negative portrayals of Muslim and Islam, and that, national newspapers specifically pick up on that wire agency copy and either just regurgitate it verbatim, with the only difference being that sometimes they go even further and sensationalize the headlines. But the regional and national statistics were more for television channels. So television channels, the regional and local ones did far better. And I think it is what you say, they have far more contact with their local communities. They're held to account more so. I think they cover things like hate crimes and Islamophobia, or even positive stories where there's Muslim initiatives that just wouldn't get the coverage on national, news channels. And I think when it comes to the national agenda, Muslims are only reported on in terms of crisis, or when there's, a terrorist attack, or when it's a negative story. That's what they thrive on. So that's the kind of reality when it comes to local versus national in terms of broadcast.
When I hear the percentages which you are sharing about the national media negativity, our national media negativity, which came out in a couple of studies, is 92% of headlines are negative in one way or the other. That includes mainstream media like New York Times and Washington Post. So it seems British media is somewhat better. I don't know if both studies are comparable, but tell me this. Has there been an improvement in media coverage? Because you have done these studies for 3 years now, as compared to the first report or the second report. Do you see some improvement?
I think it's difficult to compare because obviously the first report was just a quarterly. And also it always depends on the news cycle and on the kind of stories that are kind of appearing and making the headlines. So it's very difficult to do that kind of comparison. And I think maybe, in a couple of years' time, what we'll be able to do is look at when we first started out and our findings then and what's happened in that kind of period. But what we can say is that we have seen differences when it comes to certain newspapers. We are complaining less to them. We see far less sensationalist headlines. We know that organizations are implementing some of our recommendations. They're using our reports and evidence base to inform those guidelines and practices within newsrooms. We sit on advisory panels for some of the newspapers. We feed into regulators' guidelines on how to report on Muslims and Islam. So I think slowly things, in a small way are beginning to change, but I would not say that, they've improved. The negativity and the negative portrayal of Muslims and Islam still prevails. And I think that will take a long time because, you can have the best of wills at the top. So an editor, that we speak to very much says, yes, we're going to implement this and we want to make changes. But that the culture within newsrooms and organizations takes time to change. It takes time for all of that to trickle down. And I think also, here at the moment, and I don't know if it's the case in the States, but there's a huge kind of debate about diversity and inclusion now. And especially within the media, it's become quite apparent that, because of the levels of criticism that have been meted out towards them, that there just aren't enough Muslims or Black people or other minorities that are represented either within, newspapers or broadcasters, both on the level of journalists, but definitely on the level of kind of senior editorial decision makers, but also the output. I think it doesn't matter how many Muslims or Black people you have within an organization, if the peer pressure is very strong to conform, and there isn't actually a policy that says, no, what we're going to allow is different perspectives, and this is going to impact on the output in terms of the coverage and the kind of stories we tell and the way we tell them and from whose perspective we tell them. I think only then will we begin to see some change. But that's a mindset change, that's a cultural change, that's, practices that need to change. So I think that will take its time, but we're just going to keep plugging away at it until we see some kind of incremental changes.
Now, the news agencies you mentioned are a major problem, and I would add another dimension to it. that once news agency does the work for you, journalists sitting across the world essentially are translating whatever they are saying. They have invented the term in their language to correspond to what they are saying. So is there a special effort to influence news agencies? I was looking at a AFP News. In the same story, the same organization is mentioned less by their name, but more by fundamentalist, hardliner, extreme this. And there were about, I think I counted about 5, 6, including the terrorist. So the news agencies, do you think they are open to a dialogue for such a thorough report which you have presented to them?
Yeah, no, we have engaged with them. I mean, with Associated Press, for example, the London Bureau, unfortunately, the editor-in-chief passed away this year, but he was somebody we were engaging with very heavily. We engaged with Reuters, we are going to be, and I think our emphasis now after these findings is going to be to actually target, the news agencies, and specifically because when it comes to foreign news, the bulk of the copy comes from these news agencies. And we've seen in the coverage of whether it's, to do with Palestine or Israel or events that are happening in India or in Pakistan, we see that there's very skewed language that's used. So, when it comes to Palestine, it's spoken of as a conflict, as if it's between two equals. The whole fact of occupying forces versus, civilians with stones and slings isn't put into context. When it comes to India, it's very much seen as if it's a communal conflict, and that they're of equal powers again. It's not emphasized enough that it's an agenda by the BJP, and that the police, in many occasions when mobs are targeting Muslims, they're actually being supported by the police. You don't get the full coverage from news agencies, and so when it comes to international news, I think we will very specifically be working with the news agencies to try and get terminology right. And that's another thing that we're actually working on. It's quite a long project. But when we engage with editors and journalists, they always say, well, look, we know that sometimes we get the terminology wrong, but sometimes we don't know what to say. And it'd be great if we had a resource where we knew how and when to say things and not to say things, or what term to use. So over the past year, we've been working on a terminology guidebook where we've taken initially just 150 keywords that appear constantly in the media, from, problematic ones like Islamism, to fundamental terrorism, to jihad, and then to the less, and Sharia, for example, which is very much misinterpreted here. So what we've done is we've taken these words, we've gone back to the original source, the Quran and the Hadith, to show the context in which they were used and how they were used and the meaning. We've looked at scholarly interpretations. And then what we've done is looked at how they're used and more often misused in the media. And then we've made recommendations in terms of if they are to be used, the context within which they can be used, or alternatives that can be used. So it's still a piece of work. We should be finalizing it, and early next year we should be publishing this guidebook. And it's quite a huge piece of work and a good resource, we think, for working journalists. So that's another thing that inshallah will be coming out next year.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, RIZWANA HAMID, for your great work. She is Director of Muslim Council of Britain's Center for Media Monitoring. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you for having me on.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.